Good morning, students. Good morning to all. And last day we have studied about the classifications of companies, right? And yesterday also it was completed. But today also just we will remain about the same portions what we have studied on last day, and just we will study the new concept. Okay. So in the types of companies we have studied, we can classify the companies on the basis of more things, on the basis of incorporations and on the basis of membership, on the basis of members' liabilities, on the basis of control of members and the nationalities. And first we have studied the classification of companies on the basis of incorporations. So on the basis of incorporations we can classify the companies as three types. First one is chartered company. The chartered companies are established the king or queen of a countries, and all the powers and privileges of chartered companies is specified in the charter. Charter means it's one of the document related by the company. So power to carry their charter is vested with the king and the queens. For example, East Indian companies and Hudson Bay companies and something. And not only that, such companies cannot be started in India because the India is a democracy nation. And next, the statutory companies. The statutory companies are established by a special act made in a parliament or state assembly. The constitutions of a company is specified in the Memorandum of Associations and rules relating to day-to-day management. The day-to-day management and all the constitutions of company is specified in the Memorandum of Associations. So we will study about the Memorandum of Associations on today. Okay. Next, association not for profit. So this is also we have studied. The central government by the license grant and associations may be registered as a company with the limited liability or without using the words limited or private limited as a part of its name. So many of the charitable trusts and some of the organizations by having the aims at the promotion of sports, commerce and arts and science, religions is an example for the associations not for profit. Next, the classification of companies on the basis of membership. So on the basis of membership also we can classify the companies as a two types. First one is private company, next one is public company. So the private limited company is a type of company which is formed with a minimum 2 shareholders and 2 directors. So even a single person can able to start at the company, but he must has the 2 directors and 2 shareholders, because the shareholders and the board of directors is the most important things in a private limited companies. Okay, so many of the things also we have studied yesterday, so today we have no need. Okay, next, public company. So except the private company, all the public companies may be said to be an association which consists of at least 7 members and has a minimum paid of capital of rupees 5 lakhs, and the subsidiary of a company which is not private company, just by having the rules of or any of the government organizations conducting the company, that is called public company. Next, classification of company on the basis of liabilities. So on the basis of liabilities we can classify the companies as two types. One is the company limited by shares and company limited by guarantee. So company limited by shares mean a company limited by a shares is a company in which the liability of its member is limited by its memorandum to the amount if unpaid on the shares respectively. So in this memorandum of associations, if they have mentioned the shareholders are having some of the limitations by shares, if shareholders having the limitations by the amount of shares, that company is called company limited by shares. The companies limited by shares may be either public companies and the private companies. Next, the company limited by guarantee. So this is also will be the same like a company limited by the shares. So here what's the different mean is that a company limited by guarantee is a company in which the liability of its members is limited by its memorandum to such an amount as the members may be respectively undertake to contribute to the assets of the company in the event of its being winding up. In this memorandum of association, if it is mentioned when the company is going to winding up, some of the persons will have some of the limitations. Limitations means the responsibilities. So if the liability is mentioned in the memorandum of associations, so that company is considered as a company limited by a guarantee. Okay, some of the persons only have announced the liability of taking the guarantee if any of the problem is raised in our companies when they are going to winding up. The particular persons only will have the responsibilities. Next, classification of companies on the basis of control. So on the basis of controlness, who has the control? On the basis of the control, the power of control, so we can classify the companies as three types. First one is government company. So the Public Enterprises Incorporated under the Indian Companies Act 1956 is called a government company. If any of the companies is formed on the basis of Indian Companies Act 1956, that all the companies considered as a government companies. The government companies mean this government may be as a state government or a central government. For example, the Steel Authority of India, Indian Oil Corporations, Oil and Natural Gas Corporations, Bharat Heavy Electrical Limited, everything is also considered as a government companies. But the government companies can able to issue the shares and debentures. But these companies are registered as a private limited companies, though their management, their control vests with the government. Next, holding company. This holding company means some of the control the composition of the board of directors. As exercises or controls more than one half of the total share capital either at its own or together with one or more of its subsidiary companies. When any of the companies are having the more shares means above 51% of the shares is another company, that is called holding company. Next, the subsidiary company. The subsidiary company means a company in which the holding companies, any of the companies, when they are not able to conduct, these companies will be under the invigilations of other companies. That company is called as a subsidiary company. Next, on the basis of the nationalities, we can classify the companies as three types. First one is domestic companies. Domestic companies means so the companies and all the undertakings will be conducted within the boundaries of one nations, that is called domestic companies. So the buying and selling activities, production level and the distributions, everything will be undertaking within the boundaries of one nation is called domestic companies. Next, foreign companies. Foreign companies means if any of the nations, or for example India, if one nations are going to start at any of the company in another nations, that is called foreign companies. Now if the America is coming to India and started one of the industries or companies in India, that company name is foreign companies. Okay, the foreigners If the foreigner started any of the companies in another one of the boundaries of nations, it's called foreign companies. Next, multinational company. The multinational companies mean if any of the nations can have the more branches in different countries, that companies is multinational companies. Okay, student. Today we will go to the next concept. Next, the memorandum of associations. Already we have studied the memorandum of association, but we didn't explain. No. So, a memorandum of association is a legal document prepared in the formation and registration process of a limited liability company to define its relationship with their shareholders. Okay. The memorandum of association is also one of the legal document. It is prepared in the formation and registration process of a limited liability company to define its relationship with their shareholders. What are the relationships are there with their shareholders, and the functions of formations and the objectives of formations and the registration process, everything will be mentioned in this legal document. So in the document only will be considered as a important document in this limited company. The memorandum of association reveals what powers it has and what activities the company is permitted to undertake. So if any of the powers and the day-by-day activities and the objectives, everything will be mentioned in this memorandum of associations. If any things are undertaking which was not mentioned in this memorandum of association is legally prohibited. So any act of the company outside the scope of outlined in the memorandum is said to be ultra vires. Ultra vires means it is the legal prohibitions. So it is the constitution of the company in its relation to outside world. So what or in how and which method they are making the relationship with their shareholders, and the objectives of the companies is mentioned in this memorandum of association. It is a public document and any person dealing with the company is presumed to have sufficient knowledge of it. It is the primary document of a company. If any of the third persons want to make a dealing with a company, they must read the memorandum of association is good, because on the memorandum of associations only the company have to act. Otherwise, if any of the laws, if any of the problem is made by the company to the third parties, which was not mentioned in this memorandum of associations, the third parties cannot able to suit the complaint on the companies. Next, the contents of memorandum of associations. So in this memorandum of associations, or that is the document, in this document what are the contents have to be mentioned. First one is name clause. So the name clause requires to state the legal and recognized name of the companies. So we have studied, even the partnership organizations are a limited or unlimited company. So one of the names will be there. That names must be mentioned in this name clause. The company name is allowed to be registered if it does not bear any similarities with the name of the existing company. So already if any of the company name is existing, it is not allowed. For example, the Maruti Suzuki company is there. So already the Maruti Suzuki company is existing in our nations. Hereafter, if anybody want to start at the company in the same name, it is not allowed. Next is situation clause. Situation clause means the locations, the located of companies. The registered office clause requires to share the physical location of the registered office of the companies. So even if he has the more branches of a company, so that company must has one of the head office. So the situation of the registered head office class must be mentioned. So the company registered office would be established prior to connecting business activities. Next, objective class. So the objective class requires to summon the main objectives for establishing the companies, and which objective the company has established. That objective must be mentioned in this objective class. So it is required to state the ancillary objectives. That is, those objectives that is required to facilitate the achievement of the main objectives. So the ancillary objectives for the productions are the main objectives for conducting the business. Everything have to mention in this objective class. The objectives should be free of any provisions or declarations that contravene laws of public goods. Next is the liability class. The liability class requires to state the extent to which the shareholders of companies are liable to the debt obligations of the company in the event of company dissolving. So normally what are the liabilities are there among their shareholders and the members. Suppose if any of the liabilities is available on the basis of their unpaid capital or paid capital, or the types of liabilities must be mentioned in this liabilities class. There are companies limited by shares and limited by guarantee. Everything will be mentioned in this liability class itself. Next, capital class. The capital class requires to state the company's authorized share capital, the different categories of shares, and the nominal value of the shares. So every company will fixing the nominal value for their company shares, and the share capital for every members and every shareholders. And what are the types of categories, or what are the categories, or what are the types of shares are issued by the companies. Everything will be mentioned in this capital class. Next, association class. The association class confirms that shareholders bound by the memorandum of association are willingly associating and forming a company. So in this association class, we have to mention the real relationship with their shareholders. If the shareholders are really bound by the memorandum of association or not, everything will be mentioned clearly in this association class. It is required 7 members to sign a memorandum of association for a public company, and not less than 2 people for a memorandum of association of a private companies. So in this association class, some of the signatures of 2 members which has already signed in the memorandum of associations. The signing must be done in the presence of witness who must also append his signatures. Those signature has more value, that person's signature must be mentioned. So in this memorandum of association, there are 6 contents are there. So the name class, situation class, objective class, liability class, and capital class, and association class. Next, articles of associations. The articles of association means the rules of procedures. The articles of association is a document that contains the purpose of the company as well as the duties and responsibilities of its members. So the articles of associations contains the duties and responsibility of its members and the purpose of the companies. Okay, so the articles of association is also one of the legal document. This document contains the purpose of the companies as well as the duties and responsibility of its members. So it is an important document which needs to be filed with the register of companies. When we are going to registering the companies, we must submit the articles of associations in front of the registrar. These are by laws of company that defines the mode and manner in which the company's business is to be carried on. In which way the business is going to carried on, the details on that must be mentioned in these articles of associations. And in these articles of associations also contains some of the contents. So like a memorandum of associations. Here what are the contents has to be mentioned. I mean the amount of shares, capital, value and types of shares. So the company will issue the different type of the shares and the value of the shares, the two type of the value, the face value and the nominal value, and the amount of capital and the types of shares. So everything will be mentioned in these articles of associations. Next, rights of each class of shareholders regarding voting, dividend, return of capital. In every companies will providing the power of voting and the amount of dividend and the return of capital if any profit is arised in these companies. Okay, and in which rights they will get back, and all these things is mentioned in these articles of associations. Next, rules regarding issue of shares and debentures. So when the companies are going to issue the shares, they must have some of the rules. So all the rules related to the issues of shares must be mentioned in these articles of associations. Next, procedures as well as regulations in the respect of making calls on shares. Making calls on shares means when they are issuing their shares, if the shareholders are not paid, the company will calls to pay to the shares. Okay, for that any of the procedures are there, procedures is there, they have to mention it. Next, manner of transfer of shares. The different companies are having the different mode of way to transferring the shares. If it any rules are there, that also have to be mentioned. Next, declaration of dividends. In which method the dividends going to divide among their members. Next, the borrowing powers of the companies. So every companies will have the ratio of borrowing powers, because on the basis of issuing shares or the number of the shareholders only, one company can have the power to borrow the money. So the borrowing power of the companies also have to mention in this. Next, rules regarding the appointment, remunerations, removal of directors. Okay, if the companies want to appointing any of the laborers or fixing the remunerations or removal of the directors, so every rules has to be mentioned in these articles of associations. Next, procedure for conducting proxy quorum meeting. So the proxy means the helper and the quorum and meetings is the same meanings. If they are conducting any of the quorum or meeting, so the procedure for that is mentioned. Next, procedures concerning keeping of books and audits. If the companies must be conducting any of the books and auditing, so what are the procedures, in which procedures they have to concerning the books and audit must be mentioned. Next, seal of the companies. Already we have studied every companies must be having the seal. So the seal, the information about the seal of the companies also mentioned in these articles of association. Next, the procedures regarding the winding up of the company. When the company is going to winding up, in which position they have to winding is mentioned in these articles of association. Okay, student. Next, prospectus. So one of the word, the prospectus is also maintaining in the companies. So what's the meaning of prospectus means? So according to section 236 of the Companies Act, if any document inviting the public to buy its shares or debentures comes under the definitions of prospectus. So normally the companies will issuing the advertisement or inviting the public to buy its shares or debentures. It is considered as a prospectus. It also applies to advertisement inviting deposits from the public. If the individual persons want to depositing or purchasing the shares on the basis of their invitations only, they can come. The inviting, the document of inviting is considered as a prospectus. The prospectus also must be containing some of the contents. So what are the contents must be contained by the prospectus? So the prospectus contains the main objectives of the company, the name and addresses of the signatories of the memorandum of association, and the number of shares held by them. First, the main objectives of the companies must be mentioned in this prospectus. Next, the name and address of the signatories. Next, the memorandum of association and the number of shares held by them. Everything mentioned in this prospectus. Next, the name, address and occupations of directors and managing directors. So everyone's address must be mentioned in this prospectus. It will be helpful to the shareholders if any of the problem is arised. Next, the number and the classes of shares and debentures issued. Okay, so per every year in which amount they are going to issuing the share is must be mentioned in this prospectus. Next, the qualification of share of director and the interest of directors for the promotion of companies. So if the directors are there, the directors also must be holding some amount of companies, and if they have some interest to promoting the companies, that also must be mentioned. Next, the name and address of the vendors of any properties acquired by the company and amount paid or to be paid is also have to be mentioned. Next, the amount for the minimum subscription. So I will tell later about the subscription. Next, if the company carrying on business, the length of time of such businesses. So that is the lifespan of the companies is must be mentioned in this prospectus. Next, the estimated amount of preliminary expenses. So when they are established the companies, the preliminary expenses or the preliminary expenses of issuing the shares or purchasing the shares must be mentioned in this prospectus. Next, names and address of the auditors, bankers of the companies. Which auditor is going to audit of the companies and which bank is providing the financial facilities for their companies also must be mentioned. Because on this company only the shareholders and the members or the third parties will have the confidence to make the dealing with their companies. Next, time and place where copies of balance sheet, profits and loss account and the auditor's report may be inspected. So whenever the company is going to audit, that time, place and the auditor names must be mentioned in this prospectus. Next, the auditor's report submitted must deal with the profit and loss of the company for each year of 5 financial years immediately preceding the issue of prospectus. So all the profit and losses of the companies on last 5 years also has to be mentioned in this prospectus. Next, if any profit or reserve has been capitalized, the particulars of such capitalization will be stated in the prospectus. So the reserve has been capitalized in any of the bank or in the company itself, that amount also has to be mentioned. Okay student, so till the prospect, so the lesson is come to an end. So now our sixth chapter also have been completed. So if you have any doubt on today's portions, please ask me. So the memorandum of associations and the articles of associations and the prospectus. If you have any doubt, please ask me. I will tell you later. And just you take the articles of associations and the memorandum of associations as your study portions. Thank you.